I'd been chasing the idea of a perfect escape, a solo camping trip in the wild, away from civilization, away from everything. I found it on a sparsely marked map in a secondhand bookstore, an old logging trail deep in the Appalachian Mountains, tucked between ridges, so tight the valley barely caught sunlight. The brochure said untouched woods, pristine night skies, no cell service, exactly what I craved. What it didn't say was the stories. My name is Meredith. I left my smartphone behind except for a GPS beacon I carried in my pack. I drove until the asphalt ended, then hiked miles with this one pack, one tent, one sleeping bag. The forest greeted me with a sense of damp conifer and decaying leaves, and the dark blue of the evening sky seemed to press close. I set up my small dome tent in a clearing along the old trail, the way I'd done dozens of times before. I struck the match, the flame flickered, and I felt the kind of calm that comes just before something goes wrong. Night fell quicker than I expected. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the woods, the tapping of branches, the distant bark of a fox, the sigh of wind across ridgetops. I got comfortable, told myself I was safe, that I'd done this before. Around midnight, I felt it, a click of something behind my tent. I unzipped the front flap quietly, peered out into darkness. Nothing visible. The trees stood still, but I sensed a presence. Maybe my mind is playing tricks. In the Appalachians, people often hear voices in the woods, screams that turn out to be foxes or mountain lions. Reddit. heartstartspounding.com. I zipped the tent and tried to sleep, but I woke later to the sound of whistling. A long, low whistle, spaced out, echoing between the trees. I froze. The guidebook said if you hear whistling at night in these hills, you didn't just hear a breeze. heartstartspounding.com. The whistle stopped. Then came footsteps. Heavy, slow, circling the clearing. I held my breath. My GPS beacon light blinked once. I thought, if someone is out there, they must be lost too, maybe injured. I considered unzipping and calling out. But something stopped me. A primal warning. The footsteps paused. Then there was a rustle of leaves and a high-pitched cry, like a woman screaming, but stretched unnatural. I clamped my hand over my mouth. The scream faded into a hush. Then nothing. I sat upright, heart pounding. I thought of packing up, hiking out right then. But the dawn seemed far. Instead, I pulled my sleeping bag hood over my eyes and tried to sleep fitfully. At dawn, I emerged. The clearing looked the same, except the ground around the tent had footprints. They were large, bare footprints, elongated, the toes splayed. I traced the trail. It entered from the tree line, walked around 3 sides of my tent, and then disappeared into moss. I felt a cold dread. I packed quickly, made coffee, and tried to calm myself. Maybe an animal, maybe someone. But when I unzipped the pack to repack, one of my tent stakes was missing. I counted. I had 4, one gone. I took that as sign, get out. I grabbed the trail again. I hiked uphill, aiming for the ridge top and to catch phone signal. The trail climbed, steep and silent. The forest grew dense, trunks tight. I passed an old rusted logging cable. A metal hitch point bolted to bedrock, flakes of red paint faded. The woods felt older here, primeval. According to one source, the Appalachians' ancient geology helps give rise to the many haunted stories of this region. National Geographic. On the ridge, I paused for breath. The morning air was crisp. I rummaged in my pack for a snack. Then I heard singing. Soft, distant, half melody, half wail. I froze. It carried over the ridge, floating between pines. I strained to hear words, but there were none. Just the pitchy tone of something not quite human. I turned to go back down the way I came, but then I saw something. The path behind me was no longer the trail I had left. The downhill track split into 2, one that led into the woods and one that vanished under fallen leaves. I felt panic. My logic told me, you hiked up, you should just retrace steps. My gut said, don't go down that branch. I chose the safer side and moved fast. As I descended, the singing stopped. I glanced back. Between 2 trees, I saw a figure. A woman's silhouette, long hair tangled, wearing a dress that looked too old-fashioned for modern times. She stood still, facing uphill, her face obscured. I looked forward and kept walking, telling myself I'd misseen. But then the silhouette was gone. I broke into run. My heart thudded in my ears. The trail seemed endless, the woods dark even though it was midday. I reached the clearing where my tent had been. It looked abandoned. Except the tent was still there, zipped, nothing else moved. I ran to unzip it. Inside, nothing. My gear was intact. No one had entered. My stake, still missing. I felt relief and dread together. I grabbed all my things and set off the main logging trail, faster. Then I heard the whistle again. Closer. It seemed to circle above me, bouncing echo-like. I stopped, turned. There in the trees just off the path, I saw movement, a tall shape between the trunks. It stepped forward. Not human. Its head arched backward as though straining against something. Eyes glinting. I turned and ran as fast as I could. The forest floor gave way under my speed. I slipped. I felt hands grab my ankle. I screamed, pulled away, stood up and sprinted, the whistle screaming now behind me. I didn't look back. I reached my car on the old logging road as dusk was falling. I got in and locked the doors. As I sat panting, I glanced at the GPS beacon. The signal was gone. No service as promised. I started the engine, drove off. As the first lights of town came, I passed by an old sign. Logging trail closed, do not enter. I didn't stop. I just stared ahead. At home, I unpacked. I noticed marks around my ankles, small bruises, long thin scratches. I cleaned and stared at my reflection. Late at night, I woke to the whistle in my dreams. I dreamt of the woman's silhouette, of the footprints around my tent, of the stake missing. I couldn't escape what I saw. I couldn't shake that landscape. Weeks later, I researched the region I visited. I found stories of people hearing unexplained whistles, seeing figures in the woods, and campers disappearing. Some websites say these legends are part of the culture of the Appalachians. Shadows, cryptids, whispers in the dark. Heartstartspounding.com. I understood something. There are places you should not camp. Places where nature is not just quiet, but predatory. Places where the line between living and dead, human and other, blurs in the mist and the trees. I never returned. I sold my gear. The forest stays with me. The whistle lives in the back of my mind. Whenever I hear the wind between tall trees, I think of those footprints and the woman in the dress. And I remember the stake missing. I remember the hush that followed the scream. And I remember the rule. Do not camp here.